Good morning, everyone. This is Michael, and Tuija and I are up here in the Little Bear Meditation Center in the very Arctic climate in northern Finland, and it's going to become more and more Arctic as we go. The only thing we don't have is polar bears at the moment. Well, anyway, we have a very interesting subject today. Uh, First of all, I'd just like to welcome those of you who are here. Alexandra, Anne-Marie, Annette, Ario, Barbara, Catherine, Gregory, Jean-Pierre, Karen, Leslie, Lourdes, Marissa, Martha, Natney, Nienke, Olivia, Risto, Stacia, Stephen, Suzanne, Vera, Winnie, and Zenaide. And Michael, Stacy is helping us over here on the other side to make sure we don't run into too many technical problems. So I think we can proceed just with a little alignment. There's a lot going on these days, and the subjective work is very important, as it always will be, and especially as Michael and I were talking during the next 7 years, when hopefully certain major aspects of the humanities dwell around the threshold can be overcome. It's a very short time, but let's see what is possible. So we've come together to do some inner work. We're increasingly soul-infused personalities, and the more the soul infuses the personality, the more clearly we see uh, in this very confused arena that we call the lower 18 subplanes. It's our inheritance from the past, and we have to bring about clarification, and we might call it archetypalization in the etheric physical, the astral, and the mental areas. And that's not easy. But we have good guidance with Master DK. And we have the intention to help, which is the motivating factor. And so we will persist with the correct methods. In the long run, there's no question that the good will prevail. It's just a question of whether and for how long humanity may be needlessly delayed through its own ignorance. So we'll try to combat that. So we remain open as a working group and persist in doing what we have been given to do. A couple more people have joined, and welcome to you. Okay. Now we're beginning a very interesting subject, quite specific. It's on illusion. We may remember that under the heading of glamour, illusion, glamour, and Maya can be covered. And the same is true under illusion. Glamour, illusion, and Maya can be covered. And under Maya, they all can be covered when those terms are used in a generalized sense. We have seen the ability to contact a thought form and to start to bring it into focus But then distortion sets in as we began to study, and the ray of the ego is coloring the pure light of the idea, and the point of evolution and the degree of alignment enters here, bringing the idea down in a distorted or unclear form, an indefinite form. So DK has listed some problems that contribute to the creation of illusion. Remember that illusion per se is the problem among the intelligentsia, the people who are really mentally focused, using their minds. It's glamour is the major issue, but among the leaders of humanity, illusion is a big issue, and the leaders and their ideas condition many, many people. So some of the problems just reviewing this here, the imperfect integration of the personality, that, real integration, total integration is not occurring until the third degree. And even then you could question it. There's still more to be done. Indefiniteness of the proposed thought form, the wrong material, consequently attracted for the building of the thought form. It has to be specific and correct and appropriate. And, sometimes great ideas get clothed in unworthy material. Thought, chitta we're talking about here. The shifting focus of attention owing to the dimness of the seen ideal, so we don't steadily hold the mind in the light, so the thought form can be properly built and sustained and made strong and persistent. And in general here, the rapport of the mind with the sensed idea. Remember, ideas are from the buddhic plane and beyond. That rapport is not stable. And then in comes not only the ray of the soul, but the ray of the mental body to color the idea. If you color and specialize the idea too much, it may be meaningful to you, but you've robbed it of a lot of its general appeal because you've imposed your own ray type upon it. And I did point out last time a very important reference that can be our guide when assessing the 7 rays in our makeup and that of others, that the ray type of the mental body itself is usually different to that of the soul ray. There are a few people for whom that's not the case. I notice people who have a second ray mind and and a second ray soul. There are a couple of those, at least 2. I can't remember, maybe 3, and they had the same soul ray as mental ray, but generally speaking, the mental ray is other than the soul ray. So bear that in mind, bear this reference in mind when looking at your own ray makeup. So if there's overqualification by one of the colors, and all rays are colors and tones, if there's overqualification, then there's going to be illusion, incomplete, limited interpretation. Now, we have a very interesting section coming up here. It's not one that I really want to rush through. I don't think we can understand clearly if we do start to rush. He's talking about how illusion demonstrates, and he says, in 7 ways. I'm not sure really that he is connecting these 7 ways with the 7 rays. I don't think so. But let's try to think together and see the ways in which our misinterpretation, our limitation, our coloration of the descending idea occurs. So, and maybe we'll pause after each one, and have just a little reflection. I don't plan to get through all 7 of these today. I think it's just too much. This is in the Moria Federation. These 7 approaches constitute quite a bit of our study of illusion. It's a 2-month course. Okay. So, how does illusion appear? And the first statement is through wrong perception of an idea. Now, as we do this, remember, let's take a look here. 1, 2, 3. There we go. The ideas are coming from the cosmic ethers, and they are archetypal and formative of everything that occurs in the lower 18 subplanes and maybe even the lower 21 subplanes, which are considered physical, densely physical, from the cosmic perspective. So we have to somehow, with our apparatus, such as it is, our perceptual apparatus, such as it is, grasp the ideas that are coming from the buddhic plane and beyond, which are part of the cosmic ethers. And obviously, the more this bridge of light is built and correctly built and stably built, the more we will be able to faithfully, accurately bring down the impression we are trying to receive from the intuitive realms and beyond. I mean, it would be incorrect to say that ideas only come from the Buddhic realm of pure reason. Let's say that our first encounter with pure ideas occurs there, but obviously they are of cosmic origin and they exist farther than the mind of man can trace them. In a way, the entire universe, any universe, of which there have been an infinitude, any universe is an idea. But, we're interested first in the contrast between that being we call an idea that gives figure and form to shapeless substance, as it has been said, and the formulation of the idea in abstract and even concrete mental terms. When we start forming it concretely, it becomes more an ideal than an idea, and eventually descends into the stage where it's a materialized idol, which the origin of which has been forgotten. All right, so illusion through the wrong perception of an idea, and I think I'll get one of my little blue brackets here in case there's something to write down which is of interest. Well, it'll all be of interest, I guess. Excuse me. The disciple, in this case, cannot distinguish between an idea and an ideal. Now remember, with the ideal, a concrete mental and even emotional content, and even has been added. He cannot distinguish between an idea and an ideal, between an idea and a thought form, or between an intuitive and a mental concept. Is he saying there are intuitive concepts? It seems to be the case here. But this is what Master Moria calls oops, sorry, mental concepts. And the mental concept. Okay, he calls it straight knowledge. This is one of the ways of producing illusion found most commonly among aspirants. And let us, consider ourselves as aspirants. That way we won't miss anything and wrongly say, oh, I'm above that kind of formulation, and thereby fall victim to it. So, producing illusion found most commonly among aspirants, the mental atmosphere in which we all dwell is one of illusion, and maybe that includes the concrete, the abstract mind as well. We have to remember that the abstract mind is found in the dense physical body of the solar logos. So it's not like the abstract mind, although it's part of the triad, like the abstract mind is somehow found in the cosmic ethers. It is not. It's found in a denser type of material. Okay. It is also an atmosphere or area of conscious contact wherein thought forms of all kinds are to be found. And here's the question before us as aspirants to the truth. How do we distinguish between the really, oh, my cursor jumps, really true and the false? Or if not the false, less true. Let's say it that way. So some of them, of these thought forms, are placed there by the hierarchy for man's finding. And let's say the material on the zodiac are among such. So 12 great thought forms regarding the interpretation of the astrological constellations are placed on the mental plane for the upliftment of those who are studying astrology. So it's not that they're all bad by any means. Some of them, now we're looking at thought forms, where thought forms of all kinds can be found. Now remember that an intuition is not a thought form per se. If I was to look at what is an intuition, let's see, maybe if I use the word this, you see, a being incorporeal. Oh, I'm not doing too well right now. Because I'm not spelling it correctly. Well, how do you spell that word? Incorporeal. Okay, being an idea. Let's see if we can find anything here that is correct. INCOR, incorporate, would that do it? Okay, let's try that. Oh, incorporated. Here it is. Incorporeal. And I guess I was correct and something's wrong. Incorporeal. Nope. All right, I'm just going to let it go. There we go. Okay. So an idea, let's copy this because it's so important. It's in the consciousness of an atom and it's found in other places too. Okay, and I'm going to put it right here. Okay. Sorry for this little housekeeping business here. And here's the definition of an idea. You've seen this before. An idea is a being incorporeal which has no subsistence by itself, but gives figure and form unto shapeless matter, and becomes the cause of manifestation. That's a marvelous definition, and it will be found consciousness of the atom, and it looks like the Placidus philosophy, and it's found in several places, including in the very beginning of the Glamour book. So we've sort of reviewed that before. All right. Now, so the mental atmosphere is generally one of illusion, but the masters do place certain thought forms there. Some are men thought forms built around ideas. Some of them are very ancient ideals which have been discarded. And sometimes you see people chasing after these outlived formulations which have no real relevance to the progression of the divine plan at the moment, but they're looked at as interesting and they're adopted, and people can spend their whole life in those things. Some of them are very ancient ideals that have been discarded, but still persist as thought forms, and some of them are entirely new and therefore are not yet potent. It's like the formulation of planets, old shells, yes, and also those that are in the process of materializing but don't have much strength yet. It's like the rays in your system. Some of them are very old and you've been working on them a long time, and they just, even demonstrate some of the negative traits. They've been around a long time. Others are new. They're actually your ray, but they're not strong yet. So there are a few analogies here. Very ancient ideals and have been discarded but still persist. Some of them are entirely new and therefore are not yet potent, but most attractive. All of them have been created by man at some stage or another of his individual development. Okay. So these are the ideas, or rather the thoughts, that you're going to encounter on the mental plane, which generally is filled with illusion. This is what he said, isn't it? Okay, somewhere he said this. The mental atmosphere in which we dwell is one of illusion. Now, I've said this before, and you probably remember that we only discard illusion in the cosmic physical sense at the 9th initiation. So ever higher and more refined illusions are what we seek. Many of them, of these thought forms, are shells of long exploded concepts. You know what's really interesting? Have you seen recently the emergence of a group of people called the Flat Earthers? They do believe and have their own arguments for proving that the Earth is really flat, and that so many of the spherical or round shapes we seem to see among the planets are really a plot by scientists and others to mislead us. But in fact, the Earth is flat. Okay, well, let's just say that that would be a long exploded concept. Flat, flat Earth. Still others are embryonic. Some of them are static and stable. Many are in process of descent from intuitional levels, and let's just say it does not happen all at once. The solidification of an idea into an ideal, or a thought form or an ideal. Okay, a few are still illumined by the clear light of the soul and are ready for embodiment. Now, you've heard the old saying, and here it applies in the magical process. Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So there are ideas, or they're rendered into thought forms, whose time is past. There are ideas which are embryonic and are taking form slowly and getting ready for manifestation. And there are those illumined by the soul for whom the time is ripe in terms of the plan for manifestation. And those are the ones, of course, we want to bring into expression. A large number of other thought forms are in process of disintegration. Watch out for disintegrating thought forms because they can be poisonous. Some of these forms or embodied ideas are of a destructive nature owing to the type of matter of which they are formed. Now, I'll give you an example of this kind of idea. The German nation represents the master race of all humanity. Now, there is a powerful thought form which ruled Germany and its allies in Europe for decades. We might say that in many places it is in process of destruction. It is also being revived in a more general way due to the reincarnation of those who were not sufficiently convinced during the terrible events of World War II. So we do see this rising again, but through most thinking people, there is a destruction of such thought forms. Here's another form that's going to be destroyed. America is the absolutely best nation in the world in all ways. Okay, that's a false idealism, and it will take its place among the nations properly. But that old idea, or thought form that America has an advantage over all other nations, even though it will light the way, is something that has to be destroyed. So those are the destructive ones. These forms, certain forms, are of a destructive nature. Others are constructive. All of them are colored by some ray energy. And think of it this way, that when you generate thoughts based upon your impressions, the manner in which you generate them is going to have much to do with the ray of your soul and the ray of your mind. And then, of course, the astral body will latch onto it. A large number of these forms are necessarily built through the activity of the world of personality. Now, when you see what's going on in the United States Senate at the moment, personality is rampant, and there are some who are representing the blue Jupiterian soul of the nation, but most others are fighting contentiously in the realm of personality. And it's an ugly sight, but it will be overcome when the implications of such action are demonstrated over time. So a large number of these thought forms are necessarily built through the activity of the world of personality. Others are in process of construction through the agency of the soul. Now that's what we're working on. We're trying now to bring these new, enlightened, and more progressive thought forms to the attention of humanity's consciousness, as well as through the joint activity of both these manifestations. And what does he mean here? The joint activity of the soul infused personalities. Right perception, now we get back to the point. Right perception is therefore essential for each mind functioning correctly. We just may be misperceiving what is the nature of the idea when it is clothed in various thought forms around us in this mental world of illusion. Now, here are some distinctions we have to make. You can see, this is very deep material. I ran into this, of course, long ago because I've been studying these books for 50 years, just a couple of years short of 50 years. And I just recognize that understanding this particular section of this particular book is not an immediate factor. So let's see, we are aspirants, and let us learn to distinguish between an idea and an ideal. Now, an ideal is concrete very often, although sometimes you have abstract idealism with respect to the sixth ray. But let's just say that the idea does not have that emotional content. It has great vision. It has the ability to understand connected with it. It throws light on many aspects of creation. The ideal is a much narrower factor, and it seizes upon probably one small aspect of the idea, and according to the ray coloring of the one who thus seizes, it tries to make that ideal manifest. So, we could ponder right there, what's the difference between an idea and an ideal? Now think of your own life. What are your ideals? How do you recognize them? Your idealism, what are you trying to manifest in this world? And upon what sort of idea, since that is the origin, is your ideal based? Now, I suppose many of us have the ideal of manifesting the ageless wisdom so that it can be used as a potent content in the consciousness of more and more enlightened humanity. But what is the idea behind this? Maybe the great idea is truth. Truth, beauty, and goodness are the names of great beings, says Master DK. They're not just some abstract thought. They are beings who exist. And maybe the idea is about the nature of truth as perceived on the higher planes, and touching that somehow, that there is a truth, and that this truth reveals multiple relations, which are of the most fascinating kind. Then we form the ideal. We latch onto it and say, okay, this particular formulation of truth has to be manifested, and now I attach my desires to it, and I do everything to bring it into manifestation. So I form the Theosophical Society. I form the original arcane school, whatever. These are ways, concrete ways, of bringing this great idea of truth down into the more common form world. All right, distinguishing between these things. Well, think about your own life, Think about the extent to which you successfully distinguish between a great motivating being called an idea, an incorporeal being, and the results of attempting to manifest the influence of that being through a thought form and an idealized thought form. We have to distinguish between that which is embodied, that which is in process of being embodied, and that which is awaiting disintegration. Now, it's very interesting. There are people who latch on to ideas whose time has not come. They are misunderstood, and they may be presenting it incorrectly anyway, and the environment rejects them because the timing is not right. So in either direction lies illusion and danger. If you try to seize on something whose time is not yet come, it has no real useful value to improving the present conditioning of things. And then if you hang on to these old ideas, or rather thought forms, which should be disintegrating, you're just retarding evolution. And such peoples are called reactionaries. Okay? So I'm going to put that down. Watch A Will to Cherish. That's not it. Okay, so watch the reactionary response. Such a response would have been, World War II is over, and many things are destroyed, and along come people, and they want to rebuild the old buildings and the old churches just the way they were. Now we see, it's a sixth-ray tendency. Sometimes the third ray gets involved in that. And we see a lot of it working out right now in sixth-ray fanaticism, which wants to preserve the values and forms of the Piscean age. Okay. So obviously that is part of how the forces of obstruction work. They just delay and retard by hanging on to the past. Now, the process of being embodied, when you latch onto one of those things, it's called being a visionary, or maybe a wild visionary. I think, this man Elon Musk, he's in a bit of difficulty at the moment for various, maybe personal reasons, but I was seeing how he thinks, and he's way out there in terms of hyperloops, and when those kids were trapped in the caves, he came up with the idea of a portable submarine that would carry the parties through the flooded channels and so forth. His thinking is beyond, Not all of it can be materialized yet, but he's right at that edge where maybe it can be somewhat materialized. So ask yourself, in what you're trying to materialize in this world, is it behind its time? Is it too far ahead of its time to take hold, or is it right for the moment? Okay. And I think right and ripe are two words which go together. Now we have to distinguish between what is constructive and that which is destructive. Let the magician set his form upon the proper path. This is either rule 7 or 8 in the treatise on white magic. And we know that the counterforce is building thought forms which aim at the disintegration of human society. And we know that the new group of world servers, reflecting the hierarchy, are building thought forms which advance the divine plan. And, it goes on here, distinguish between the old and the new forms of ideas. Well, okay, there are certain principles which are forever true, but maybe according to advancing civilization and culture, they need to be expressed in new ways. Now, here, I'll give you a thought. Reincarnation. It's a coming thing. Before long, many people will believe and accept the probability that reincarnation expresses a truth in nature and in supernature. However, the new method of presenting that age-old idea will take advantage of scientific discoveries which are recent, and it will be formulated in a new manner which is much more acceptable to the modern thinking individual than maybe the old presentation, which is thousands and even millions of years old. So look for sometimes the same essential idea presented in new and different forms, and you can find, a very interesting phenomena of how the clothing of the same principle changes over time according to the capacity of the human being, culture, and civilization. Okay, what else do we have to distinguish between? Between the ray ideas and forms as they color the higher presentation. Now, here's an example of that. DK said that Agni Yoga was a way of presenting the yoga of synthesis in a first ray manner, but that the true second ray presentation of the yoga of synthesis has not yet been formulated, although you could tell that he was kind of working on that because he works so closely with the Master M and he has a good deal of the first ray in his nature. So you get what I'm saying here? It's all about the yoga of synthesis. It's what's coming for us following the Raja Yoga, but of course we have not yet necessarily, well, none of us have. We have not yet mastered Raja Yoga, but the coming yoga is the yoga of synthesis. There's a first ray presentation of it. There's a coming second ray presentation of it. And who knows how the other rays would offer their formulations on this coming yoga. So rays indeed do color the fundamental idea. I think there's a line from the poet Shelley. Try not to mess it up too much, but life like a dome of many colored glass stains the white radiance of eternity. So here we have the white radiance of eternity. Here we have all of these different colors in the great dome through which the light shines. And from this point of view, color is a stain upon a great all-inclusive presentation. Okay, as a way of presenting. All right, so I think you get that idea. I think we all do. We have to distinguish between ideas and thought forms. Oh, he's been saying that. And between those which are purposely created by hierarchy and those which are created by humanity. So, example, anchoring the zodiacal thought forms, which they did, I guess, somewhere I read in Atlantean times. And as a result, the energies of the constellations can be specialized for human purposes much more easily than if they had not done that particular type of service. And here's another between racial thought forms and group ideas. Now, this is an important one. We are born in certain races and peoples who have their biases and prejudices. There's a way of thinking when you're born in a certain group. And we have to understand how much they condition us in the early days. It's much different than when we deliberately form a group with like-minded people to access the intuitive levels, regardless of where we came from, regardless of what nationality or cultural group. We get beyond that into the true group ideas. All right, so this has been interesting, I think. Aspirants must learn how to distinguish between these factors. So, look, put yourself to the test. These things are easily said, but do we really do them? And are these methods of distinction or distinguishing part of our approach to the world of ideas and the world of thoughts? Okay, so now let's just finish a little more here, because I'd like to do at least one every time. These are so deep, we're studying the world of illusion. We have a very limited mental apparatus. We tend to use it incorrectly often. And then we think our conclusions are unimpeachable, that they cannot be assailed, that they are correct, when in fact they're extremely partial and very distorted. So let's catch ourselves up on where we're making mistakes in interpretation and thereby contribute to the truth of the divine plan as it is trying to manifest. He says, he could do it. I could list many more differentiations. Notice that he lists 7 of them, but the above will suffice to show the need for right perceptions and to indicate the roots of the prevalence of the world illusion brought about by wrong perception. Okay, so, we perceive something, but we don't know the true value of what we're perceiving, and we're just perceiving incorrectly or in a way that's so limiting and partial that it becomes not only useless, but destructive and inhibitory. Now, I love it how he, at the end of these 7 illusions, or 7 causes of illusion, he sums it up like a good teacher should. The cause of this, now how does he, let's see what he calls it. Up here he calls it, we're getting there, through wrong perception of an idea. Okay, so the cause of this wrong perception of an idea, what is the cause? The cause is an untrained, unillumined mind. Okay. The cure is training in the technique of Raja Yoga. Now, the light of the soul, there were many Patanjalis, but the great master who was responsible under a kind of a second ray, fifth ray impulse for providing those sutras lived about 10,000 years ago, something like that. So the method has been around a long time. The hierarchy, the society of organized and illumined minds. We want to be like that. Is our mind really trained? Is it filled with light? We have to question. We must constantly train the mind to think with clarity, stick to the point, penetrate, relate to higher sources, and it has to be filled with that which reveals possibilities beyond our normal senses. And the cure, and it's an arduous cure, you can imagine it can take lifetimes, is training in the technique of Raja Yoga, which is one of those books that he says that every aspirant, every disciple should have with him. There's a few of those books that we're supposed to have, the New Testament and the Viveka Kudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination, and the Raja Yoga book we're supposed to have. That's 3. Maybe there are a few others, I'm not sure. But they are to be, Bhagavad Gita. That's another one. Okay. These are supposed to be in our library, in our pockets, as we train ourselves to be true disciples. Okay. Now, if we do this, and we take the cure, take the medicine, we won't be victim of this illusion through wrong perception. This results in the ability to hold the mind steady in the light. Can we do this? To perceive correctly, to achieve a right outlook, and to attain a right mental attitude. It was these right attitudes with which the Buddha was dealing when he outlined the Noble Eightfold Path. It involves the reaching of a right mental altitude. Yes, I said altitude, my brothers, and not attitude. Well, there's a lot to think about here, isn't there? It's a wonderful presentation of how to overcome the limited perceptions that we are used to indulging in by training and illumining our mind and following the technique of Raja Yoga, which has in it that moral foundation, of 5 commandments and 5 something else. You have to follow those 10 things in the very beginning, and then you can actually begin to work in the true kingly science of the soul. That's what Raja Yoga means. And that is a preparation for Agni Yoga, into which we are coming. Okay, so that's, obviously, that's all I'm going to do now. And maybe some ideas have come to you that you would like to take up, questions, whatever, and then we can go into our meditation and hopefully overcome this glamour based on selfishness and self-interest and based on wrong identification as a personality, which will sacrifice the truth for the perpetuation of personal advantage. The 4 books. Okay, right, Anne. Okay, so, well, the New Testament and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, you have those in Alice Bailey's Light of the Soul, because basically what the Tibetan did is he made himself responsible for translating the ancient sentences, the sutras, and then Alice Bailey wrote the commentary, I'm sure, with the Tibetan supervision. But how did she amusingly put it at one point? Said, I wrote my books just to prove that after all, I did have a brain. If someone's always receiving from somebody else, as demanding as it may be, who are you in your own right? So she wrote some very, very useful books. And one of the books that I find most useful is From Intellect to Intuition, where the various methods of meditation, concentration, meditation, contemplation, and then, I don't know, inspiration and initiation and beyond that, but at least she gets in a marvelous description of what is contemplation. So if you don't have the light of the, you don't have From Intellect to Intuition, get that and study it carefully. So what do we have here? The Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the New Testament, and this little book by the ancient, well, not so ancient, maybe a sage, gosh, what is his name? Well, at least I know what he wrote. I mean, look, I wrote a whole book on this guy, and suddenly it's just going out the window. But it's called The Crest Jewel of Discrimination. And it's all about the discrimination between the real and the unreal, between the dense physical body of the solar logos and the cosmic etheric body of the solar logos. Now, oh yes, sat. Oh, this is embarrassing. Excuse me. You can't write a book that's 900 or 1,000 pages long on the main idea of a man and then forget his name. Does anybody remember it? Maybe you do, Alex? Do you remember that? Shankara, oh golly. All right, I'm going to have to do penance now or something. Go back to the old Christian days, Little flagellation might help. Shankaracharya, yeah, or Shankara, exactly. Thank you. I dedicated the book to him, so it must be age, something. Anyway, those four, Anne, that I can think of at the moment. Maybe there's another one somewhere, but every aspirant, he said, should have those four books in close proximity, because what's given in these books solves our problem. Yeah, exactly. Vivekananda was the great. Well, he commented on Raja Yoga. He was the pupil of Ramakrishna, and he was tremendously devoted to Ramakrishna. And he says, well, you think Ramakrishna is a mystic, but he's the true Gnani Yoga, not I. And then, when you think about Vivekananda, that he was supposedly successful in memorizing an entire encyclopedia, that's the Gnani approach, the knowledge approach. He used to chain himself to a desk so he could not escape from his studies. Anyway, there's the biography of Vivekananda and the biography of Ramakrishna, and they're found in the same book, and I don't know who produces them, but you can find them. So Shankaracharya, let's see, Master Moria basically said that when you're looking at Shankaracharya and the Buddha, they are like two great hemispheres of the whole. They both work together to give a different point of view, both of them utterly necessary. Now, I find Shankaracharya to be uncompromising in his quest of absoluteness, the absolute substratum out of which all differentiation comes. And I find the Buddha to be aware of this, I think he called it suchness, but he becomes extremely practical about what you must carry out. Of course, he was a Taurian individual, so the story goes, and we don't know the astrology of Shankaracharya. We didn't even know when he lived. There's so many different Shankaracharyas, and some people have him quite recently, but I think not. The original was quite a bit older than that. Anyway, we have his book called The Crest Jewel of Discrimination. Apparently, he was very intense. He founded many monasteries. He did lives and lives of work in one life. I think he died at the age of 32, something like that. He was clearly a master, just the way the Buddha was a master, and maybe more. All right, good, thank you. Thanks, Shankaracharya. Okay, now your thoughts, okay, Tuija? And go ahead, dear.
Okay, good morning to everybody. It's really interesting subject and very important subject to think about. A few thoughts what I have been, while you have been talking, contemplating. One thing is about the fact that every single one needs to be heard. It's not only wants to be heard, but needs to be heard. When we think that we are only one being and every single voice is bringing one aspect of that one being, and that's why it needs to be heard. And what is happening at the moment around the world with this Me Too movement is about that now. You were saying what DK said about the ideal. There's nothing more powerful than the ideal when its time has come. And I think now it has come to that place in a human evolution. We move forward, and women has to be heard now. Then I'm sure that it is coming the children as well, but to be heard. And to that it is bound this interesting thing, what is related to the right memory. And I have been contemplating that a lot. It's one of the sides of the Noble Eightfold Path of by Buddha, who is teaching us how we can redeem ourselves, and right memory belongs to that. How do we listen to each other? Really listen is a key thing for the right memory. The right memory, how it is affecting in every aspect of our living, is that if we do not listen, if we do not hear, we make up all our own stories, and then the whole question about the lie, and thinking about how quick the elemental life in the in both or whatever plane, we can take all planes, but for us humans the mental plane is the key thing. And if we have the incorrect memory, which is colored by our own desires or our own wishes and our own demands to be not to be seen in truth, we start to build up those wrong patterns, what these little elementals patterns immediately. And then our whole concrete mind is covered by those wrong patterned thought forms and wrong patterned ways of going into things. So we can say that the ideal is the same for all of us, but then the ideas of that ideal is varying. How do we start to manifest? But if that is covered by all of these wrong patterned ways in our minds, it is like that wherever the drop of the truth comes, it cannot come in truth, because our manifestational body is covered by the wrong patterns, which these little elementals are using when they are building. So in that sense, I'm looking that the right memory in everything is the key thing, or to many things, to correctly remember what happened, how do we speak, that we talk according to that. But of course, when we think about the mountain, that everybody is climbing the mountain from all of the aspects of the mountain, the vision is different. But yet, wherever we are standing, if one is practicing the correct memory and according to that, what correctly has happened, then we build in those elemental lives those correct patterns. And our great teacher, Michael knows, he's called Ervast, and he was saying that the natural evolution when one practices the truth is the clairvoyance and clairaudience. So all of this which comes for our faculties to help us is based upon those little tiny steps in our own lives, based upon this correct memory and all of the other aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, because that corrects us to those lines of truth, and in that sense to go through the jungle of the illusions through the mental plane.
Michael, turn on your microphone.
Didn't you like my Charlie Chaplin kind of, Okay, thank you. See, we rely upon the voice of God coming from the right-hand path to tell us when we're not being heard. Anyway, the idea is the primary thing, and the ideal is the secondary thing. So as you are climbing this mountain, you are climbing with your idealism, but it's the idea that everybody shares at the top, and we have these ray perspectives on what the entire idea may be. Now, when we achieve true, pure reason, buddhic consciousness, the entirety of the idea becomes ours, and we can let the partiality of the ideal based upon our race structure, we can let that go. Because maybe I didn't hear to you, but I thought that they were reversed there. So I just wanted...
Oh, sorry, I did say wrongly. I'm sorry.
No.
I meant the opposite.
I know you meant it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to set the matter straight on that particular point. But they've done research that shows that you can even implant false memories in people, and they will believe it. In other words, it never really happened, but they've told themselves, there's either an implantation through a psychological method, or they've told themselves that it has happened in thus and such a way so many times that it is now
Michael,
a memory. Yes.
Yes, I told you. I saw that documentary.
Yeah.
I told you it was that there was a group of people who was repeated the lie. They actually themselves, they were at present what happened, but then the group talked the lie, and in the third time the memory started to be twisted already to the lie.
It's very...
That tells about how weak the average humanity is for the lies which are going on. And when you study Trump, it is so amazing how he is like the manifestation at the moment, what I could think in this global arena, who uses that strong standing and just says that it is a lie, this is a false news. And because of standing and expressing it so strongly, it is the body language which is giving the message to this weak mind that is the fact, that is the truth.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, it's going on now, and it's very dangerous. It has to be overcome, and it's not new. If you go back to World War II, you have the chief propagandist, Joseph Goebbels, saying, look, if you're going to tell a lie, tell it big and tell it often. So he kept on repeating these falsehoods until they became part of the living psyche of the weak minds who receive them. And of course, it's much older than that. It's just a method of the dark forces, frankly, the forces of untruth. And that's one of the things we're going to have to meditate on today, is the whole idea of how personal interest distorts the truth. Yes, okay. Thank you, Tuija and Anne and Alexandra. Any other things that you want to bring up and discuss or ask about?
Olivia has her hand raised.
Okay, let me go down there. Okay, here we are. Wait a second, Livy. Gotcha, and there you go. Okay, cool.
I couldn't resist saying that also if someone drinks too much, that can also distort their sense of reality of what happened and what is truth. So we have, of course, that issue going on right now. And it's really incredible, I guess, because we have so much personal energy and deliberate intended distortion that in our Senate we could have so many completely different perspectives on what is truth. And even with what we've seen, and of course we did not get a full investigation because 40 really qualified people who had important information to share came forward and wanted to talk to the FBI to be interviewed. And there were only 9 interviews held because of the White House limitations, we're sure. But the idea is that 57% of the people, after all of this, there was a poll that just came out, and they say they approve of Kavanaugh. They believe Kavanaugh for a yes vote. And 50% of the Republicans, these are Republicans we're talking about, have given Trump a 50% approval rating, which is one of the highest he's gotten.
Yeah.
So the polarization, I think when we get emotion into this, and the idea of discernment and discrimination just goes out the window. Facts really don't matter, and people aren't even trying. But this idea of developing the true democracy, which is, as DK says, is as yet unknown, yes. And it awaits the time when an educated and an enlightened public will bring it to power.
Yeah.
So we obviously are not there yet, and it will take a while. It's really, it can be discouraging, but we know it will eventually come.
Yeah.
But it's just how long.
Yeah, it's the dumbing down, any attack on education and on the quality of the light that comes into a nation will result in governmental movements such as we have, which are completely personal and do not take the higher values into consideration. Now, the one thing, do I console myself? I don't know. But by the end of this century, DK tells us the Piscean influence will have completely dissipated in the way that it's affecting us now. And by the year 2025, the 6th ray in the cycle, which affects humanity particularly, will be evaporated, or at least out of incarnation for the moment. And a lot more 7th ray souls who are practical and want to bring heaven and earth together will be in incarnation. So in a way, this is kind of a, what do you call it, a last-ditch stand. It's a final hurrah. It can be terribly destructive, but it has its time limit because of the cycles. Now, meanwhile, people like ourselves, we have to work on alleviating the terribly negative possibilities which are inherent in this recrudescence of the sixth ray. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, look, we know what our work is, and it's interior work, and it can be very, very effective, but it's just amazing to see how selfishness distorts perception. And when I say, yeah, I mean, in other words, I'm just a personal being. I am who I am. I'm the greatest. I'm the whatever. And then your perceptions are all crafted according to that limited state of identification. Anyway, it's a sad thing, but let's just see where we go. There's always an upside to these matters. And look, neither of these parties is perfect. They all have their liabilities, but one is blue and one is red. and and I just say this: it's better for Jupiter to triumph than Mars at this particular time in our evolution. And I think when we've been led into the consequences of where this nativistic attitude is taking us, there will be a turnaround. Meanwhile, okay.
Meanwhile, we keep the light going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, this,
Thank you.
it's apologies to those of you who are not Americans. Uh, we're kind of deeply, deeply involved in this. It does have global implications because we have a rogue leader who is utterly narcissistic. And, I joked with one of my friends that says, in the wee hours of the night, he runs around with a Roman toga, just to bring back the good old days, So we are all transplants from a previous time. And if we have not overcome the problem of love of our own little self, narcissism, and all the rest of it, we're going to be a menace to everybody. It may be just our little family or our little group, but when you're the head of a nation, it can have world significance. So we have to do our best with these occult techniques, and we will do our part, As Tuija told the story once about the forest fire and all the animals saying it was hopeless, you couldn't put it out, but this little bird came down and got one drop of water, threw it on the forest fire, went back, got another and another and another, and she was laughed at, and she says, well, at least I've played my part, So I hope that we're more than a drop of water here, and I hope that around the world there are others working with occult techniques to undermine the obvious attack on humanity, the last ditch fight of materialism, which is now taking place, and using the recrudescence of the sixth ray and the worst of Pisces to mislead people. So, well, let's do our part. Okay.
Michael?
Yes, Michael.
Alexandra calls this gaslighting, and then Leslie has provided a quote from Goebbels.
Okay. Thank you. Hey, yes, Alex, what is the definition of gaslighting?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a process. It's based on an old film called Gaslight, and the idea is that if you repeat a lie or a mistruth or a misperception over and over again enough, then the person begins to believe it.
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening. People are writing books about it now. But it's the term comes from an old film about a woman who was actually told that she was mad, and she wasn't. Yeah, she was seeing the gaslights flicker, and the man who wanted to control her mind told her that she was imagining it. So it's the same exact principle, that he kept telling her that she was imagining it, or that she was mad, and she came to believe that she was mad. So if you repeat something long enough, then people come to believe it. And while I'm online, can I just say something else?
Please do. Go ahead.
Yeah. So because I know we all, American news sucks up all the oxygen and all of our emotions and attention.
Yeah.
But Brexit is all. Brexit is also an event of global significance. What happens in Europe, and it's, to my mind, it's the same disease in essence. Without going into detail about the 1% and the intention behind it. The problem is that in the UK we have a primarily right-wing press. So the truth about Brexit and what's behind it does not get airing. And also because perhaps the nature of the people, there's not as much weeping and wailing out loud, but there is massive shifting going on here in the UK now, particularly for a second people's vote. And also I have inside information from people saying that they honestly think it can't happen because it actually is impossible to happen. But you're not going to hear that anywhere. So I just want to tell people
what cannot happen. What cannot happen, Alex? The what?
That breaks it. So people within the Labour Party are saying to each other quietly that Brexit won't actually happen because it can't happen. For 2 years, they've been trying to figure out how to disentangle Great Britain from Europe, and it is, and all this putting forward of, plans and this plan and the Chequers plan, but nothing works because we are so deeply intertwined with each other, politically, economically, socially, everything, but mainly trade and business. And also the truth has come out now that it already, the effect on Britain has been so negative. House prices dropping, pound sterling, etc., this sort of thing. So it's that truth is coming out, and also people were lied to, and also there was corruption within the campaign, but so few people within Britain know it, and in the world. And that disease started here. And it's the same one, and it has to do with separativeness and greed. So it's somehow, I think as Americans, we need to kind of broaden our perspective that it's not just what happens in America, it's happening everywhere now.
In another form. I've been following it, and it's amazing, the complexity and the deterrence against disengagement. So, it's the same thing. Look, and when you think of it, the three nations, I don't know how this is working out in Russia, but he says the fate of humanity lies with the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia. Okay? So we see definite attacks operating in UK and in America. Now, maybe we can interpret certain things in Russia. UK and Russia at the moment are, in contention about the interference of Russia in UK's affairs and so forth. And there's certain governmental tendencies in Russia which are nefarious. Let's just put it that way. So all these nations are being attacked by the counterforce. and their alliance and their work together in the right way is so essential for the future of humanity. Now, you may remember reading that in 2035, Russia will sponsor legislation on behalf of children, and the United States will back it up. That seems a very long way away, but this is what the Tibetan seems to be seeing. So maybe we're going to get through this. That is the hope. Thank you for that amplification, Alex.
Michael, can I just add quickly about the Russians' role? Now the Russia has been pointed out because of the cyber attack to several countries.
Yes.
And there is now the movement in as you know, in the European Union about this bringing that out. So all of these countries, when we think about that, there are dangerous things, and as pointed out by all of us, the counterforce, the black law functioning. And just for the comment for Alex, and that just proves, because the Europe is one unit of consciousness, so we all belong together, and that's why all of those forces which tries to, when we think about that, there is the atom, there is the man, there is the planet, there is the solar logos, all these units, or the higher one includes the smaller one, and in our humanity, there are also those consciousness units. And that's why it is the attack by Black Lord is just attacking to these consciousness units to try to break it and try to forward the higher ideas, or and how the ideals are working.
Yes.
Like, it is at the moment, and it's so obvious to see it, and why we need to work together, why we need to have a vision of the higher and the new world, the new dawning age, is really our beauty.
Yeah, exactly. This political discussion has sparked a lot of hands. I just want to quickly read what Leslie put here about Goebbels. It's called gaslighting. Okay, here it is. Wait, Leslie, where did you start? Joseph Goebbels. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie, such as the rebombing of Germany. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest what? Enemy, I suppose. Well, what basically what DK says is that of those 7 men, yeah, go ahead, Leslie. Yeah, was that word enemy possibly?
Oh, the greatest enemy of the state. Can you see it there? I put it there again. The truth is the great enemy of the state.
I got it. Okay, yeah. Wow. Okay. He said of those 7, thank you, Leslie, that were gathered for the negative impression of the Shambhala force, 2 of them were the worst, and truly in the clutches of the Black Lodge, and that was Hitler. And he didn't say who the other one was. I'm sure it was Goebbels, because of his sheer power to manipulate the mind. Okay, so, all right, so this is a very good thing to have in mind, and we see the old method being hauled out now, even unconsciously by some. So we have to continue to repeat the truth in ways that it can be apprehended. Yes, okay. Leslie, did you want to say something else?
Sure. We also remember in the externalization, right, where DK says that Hitler and his gang were overshadowed by forces of an extraplanetary nature.
Well,
do you remember that part?
I didn't remember the extraplanetary part. I remember by the leaders of the Black Lodge. I remember that much. But extraplanetary, okay, that's even more, because after all, it was cosmic evil we're talking about. And let's just see if we have another attack, because the door was not sealed entirely. So to what extent is this attack as serious as that, or can it be pushed back onto the astral plane where it belongs? So maybe you find the page number for that somewhere, Leslie. I'd be very interested.
Sure, I'm looking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Let's go on with this a little bit more, because we have to finish our meditation soon. So please explain why Joe. He says right mental altitude. Well, it's Joanne. It's a play on words, of course, but what it means is to hold the mind or the consciousness at a sufficiently high point of tension where the perceptions of the higher worlds can be accurate. All through his teaching, there's this play on words between attitude and altitude. And according to the height of your point of tension, i.e. its altitude, so will be your perception and the resultant attitude you develop, and out of which you act. So not many of us yet have developed the ability to focus the consciousness in the altitude called the causal body. And he says this is one of the reasons we fail in meditation. So in Letters on Occult Meditation, he deals with this. So many do not succeed in meditation because they cannot focus within the causal body. That's a certain altitude. Now, if an elevation of the point of tension such that certain perceptions are now made available which otherwise would not be. Now, if I am able to build the antikarana correctly, I focus in the abstract mind, maybe. Maybe I focus even in the buddhic level, as the masters do. That's an entirely different altitude with resultant attitudes because of what is perceived and resultant action. Okay, so that's what it means to me at the moment. Right. So if anyone says that you bet, John, that truth is the enemy of the state, you know what side he's on, And by the way, Goebbels, very interesting ray chart, in my view. A third ray manipulator of souls, as far as I can understand. Third ray soul with a first sub ray and a sixth ray, almost sickly devoted personality. You know how they named all of their children with an H. They had 6 children. They killed them all at the end. And every one of them was named because of the devotion to Hitler with an H, So this was absolute fanaticism plus manipulation. And his wife was even more extreme than he was. Anyway, those things were taking place. All right, so let's see. Anything else here? Now let's see. And we had Anne, and let's see, Alex, did you have something else? I see your hand up. Maybe I didn't put it down. I don't know.
Yes.
Go
yes.
ahead.
Can I please say that in life, referring to this triangle, Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom, in life, if we have an enemy and we put all the blame for our problems on that enemy, that perhaps hinders our seeing the larger picture. So similarly, if we put the blame on one of those countries for, as being the evil, the cause of evil in the world, and say another of those countries stands for truth, justice,
and the
American way,
yeah.
and they're, and they're polarized. They're diametrically opposed to each other all the time. One is black and one is white. It's just not true. And if we want to see the destiny of those nations come forth, we need to hold a larger vision. Alice Bailey says in Problems of Humanity that no nation is completely innocent or completely guilty.
Indeed. There is this whole psychological issue of projection. It's easy to see our own negativity in the other guy, and this relieves us of the responsibility of dealing with our own sources of evil. And we're not, and it's unconscious at first, and the sixth-ray types are particularly prone to do it. Now, Russia has a sixth-ray personality. The United States has a sixth-ray personality. And this kind of mutual projection is going to go on. Maybe the UK has a little bit of sanity. They are not so affected by that particular polarizing ray. But what is needed is the fourth ray, which is coming in power in just a few years, where, somehow the fourth ray people really see what's in themselves and that they share it with other people. So no one stands in perfect supreme innocence, and no one stands in hellish guilt. So, he says the fourth ray will help us a lot, he says. Yeah.
Yes. So that's more gaslighting by the mainstream media to put the blame on. International relations is just far too complex to say that anyone
and one of the anchors
has perpetrated all the evil.
One of the anchors of the triangle of evil, which is one of the points is in the Middle East, and one of the points is in America. Perhaps with the Zionist movement, I don't know. But, I think it's deeper than that now. I think it's with the reactionaries in America. And another point is in Central Europe, in an unspecified place. That is the triangle of evil at this time. So, obviously the United States doesn't have a chance of saying, we're wonderful, America the beautiful, and all the rest of you. You know how it is. America first, that whole business. It's just primitive. Okay, now, friends, I think we have to get on. Let's see.
Ario has had his hand raised for a long time.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ario, I'm sorry. I missed it. Go ahead, Ario. Go ahead.
Okay, I thought when you talk about this right timing of thought forms, then how it is affecting this process which Mother Earth is going through, because it is also said that those transformation times, it is also easier for the people go through quicker their karma process. Then maybe also this transformation of the earth is also somehow related to the right timing of a certain, let's say, more light forms.
Yes, on Earth we are really going through it, and it's critical. And the page here is Cosmic Fire 384. Here's what's happening and why it's such a heavy karmic time, but also filled with opportunity, because Saturn is pressing us so that we must perform. About our planetary logos, he is in physical incarnation. He is midway through his career upon the path of initiation. That means that he's focusing on our little globe, which is the fourth, and is consequently to take the fourth initiation in this chain. Now, we know about the fourth initiation and all of the karma that comes home to roost, but then at least we we are alleviated. It is alleviated, and we are no longer under its spell. Well may this globe, therefore, now notice it's globe, be called the globe of sorrow and pain. Notice is not just the planet, but the globe, for it, through it, our planetary logos is undergoing what the mystics call the crucifixion. The cells in his body, those cells which he feels and senses, through which he feels and senses and experiences, are in this world period torn, rent by pain and suffering, for his is the consciousness at the center of the body, and theirs the capacity to suffer. That's us, and it's all for good purpose, so that by means of them, the suffering cells, he may learn the meaning of systemic dispassion, be dissociated from all forms and material substance, and upon the cross of matter eventually find liberation and freedom of the spirit. So this is a tremendous little statement about what's going on in our planet. And although it's tough, it is necessary because we fell behind long ago, and now we're making up through lost time by extreme karmic pressure, which is upon us, and we will move faster because of it. So page 384 of a treatise on cosmic fire. Okay. Thank you, Ariel. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that was
That's
all
it, okay.
what I have in mind.
Yeah. Okay, well, we know how difficult it is, and we know why it is difficult. And I want to say that the tendencies of the previous solar system and the ideal tendencies of the present second major solar system are meeting right here in our Earth scheme. And we are living through a time of that type of meeting. So it cannot possibly be easy, but it will be effective. It will be accelerating, and it will bring us up to a level we need. Remember that we are supposed to be as advanced as Venus is now. They are twin sisters, Earth and Venus, but Earth fell behind, and if all worked properly, we would be at the same level of evolution as Venus is now. But we're not, and therefore we have to re-accelerate so we can rise to the level where we really belong. And all of us have the privilege of living through this. So enjoy. Okay, thank you, Ariel. Okay, will that do for everybody? Because now we do have to have our meditation. And I may abbreviate it just a little bit. Let's just see. Well, I shouldn't do it too much because things are very serious right now. All right, so let's go. And we'll just be quiet for a little while and gather our forces. And you can feel, there are significant forces here in our group, and we can be effective. So our protective formula with the long-armed cross and using the two eyes, we know how that works. So we say that together, imagining as we do that cross of protection lighting up for each one of us and for the group as a whole. As a soul, I work in light. And Darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. Now we bring the three lights together. We know how to do this. Raising up the light of matter to the plane of mind. Focusing the light of the mind so the two are one. The vital light of matter and the plane of mind are ordinary, logical, clear, reasonable thinking. And we focus and watch imaginatively the descent of the light of the soul. So from a very real place within us, this soul light descends, and there is a fusion of the two lesser lights. Our little chihuahua wants to get in on the meditation, so if you hear some strange sounds, that is aspiring towards the future. But she has a good name. Her name is Sophia, means wisdom and light, and she's on her way. So the three lights come together. Three lights come together, and the three are one. On the plane of mind, the light of the soul, the light of mind, and the vital light of matter. And then, with the sense of those three lights as one, which will form our weapon and our instrument of perception, both, the searchlight, we say, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Now we generate our searchlight. It's as if we allow the triple light to expand into the searchlight. It goes onto the astral plane as we may imagine it, full of its veils and clouds and mists and fogs and obstructions to truth and clear sight. But our beam is out there. The many beams making the one group beam. And so we say together the formula. Radiance and power are we. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth. The inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. And we strengthen our beam through the spiritual will, monad, atma, jewel in the lotus, soul petals. The spiritual will descends, and we imagine that will, the will to uphold the purpose and the plan of our planetary logos, will strengthen the beam. And we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And our goal to dissipate this ignorant personal attitude which sees the little personality as the measure of all things. The happiness, the contentment, the satisfaction of the little personality as if it's the most important thing in the world, whether or not we admit it. So it's the glamour of personality which leads to the manipulation of the environment in such a way that the manifestation of the divine plan is delayed or thwarted, blocked. The personality is temporarily happy, pleased, and the greater good is not accomplished. So we're going to, we've seen what's been happening. Truth is the first casualty of selfish personalism. Truth is the first casualty of selfish personalism. So we want to clarify so that manipulation based on a personal attitude cannot hide, distort the truth. And so we say these words of power together, and as we do so, we see the light penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and dissipation. We're supposed to not have this personal attitude, this group attitude that our little group is somehow the best and must triumph over the others. We have to have in mind, it's always how the masters work, the greatest good of the greatest number. And those with a strictly personal attitude cannot have in their mind the greatest good of the greatest number. The larger values are lost to sight. So as esotericists in training, we're going to add our consciousness and our inner abilities to clarify the situation and make that personality shrink, shrink, and shrink until it becomes a point, and then in Leo, later, a relinquished point. So here we go. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of, we'll call it personalism, the glamour of personalism, making the personality the measure of all things. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour. This rampant glamour of personalism, even in the highest ranks of leadership. So let's have our moments of silence, visualizing our beam penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and its dissipation. And we're functioning in silence under an intensity of purpose to rid humanity of this distortion which ignores the higher of the pairs of opposites, the soul. So here we go. And as you can see in these days, when major governmental systems across the world are tending towards separative dictatorship, we have a recrudescence of the personal attitude. We need to find the way to think impersonally. One of the very first things when you join the arcane school or you study with the Tibetan, impersonality, the quality of consciousness of the spiritual triad. We need to think in planetary terms about humanity and the greatest good for the greatest number of human beings, and by association, the greatest good of the other kingdoms. You know, we cannot wipe out the elephants, if you know what I mean. Some terrible things are happening with respect to the other kingdoms, but if we think planetarily, for the greatest good of the greatest number of sentient beings on our planet, then the kingdoms of nature will come into right relation. The great theme of Shambhala now, right relations. So let us assume we've done a little bit of work and that the sun of truth and beauty and goodness is shining a little more brightly upon the astral plane and within Kama Manas, and the mind is escaping a little from its limited misinterpretations, and will sound 3 ohms to imagine that this good work is being furthered by our small but persistent efforts. Okay, friends, thank you. These are critical days all over the world, and for the next 7 years, we're going to find a lot of these periods when important decisions are being made which will determine whether humanity can enter the Aquarian age properly. Because there are other methods of entering the Aquarian age, and one doesn't want to think about those possibilities. So tomorrow at the morning time, we'll work on the soul of nations, which absolutely must be invoked and evoked in order to overcome this recrudescence. I keep on using that word, you know. It's kind of a fateful and unwanted flourishing of a negative attitude at the end of a cycle. This recrudescence of the personal attitude, we can dissolve that through removing our projections from the other countries and people, and see the people and countries in their soul nature. But one of the hardest things to do is to remove your projections. Every psychologist knows that, because then you have to admit, say, it's in me, and I thought it was in the other guy or the other nation. So we work on our psychological clarification in this work of the trained observers. Okay, hopefully we'll see you then. It's really important. We do some emergency work where emergencies appear, every Saturday. We do that kind of work, and bringing forward the soul of nations, and then attracting resources, money for hierarchical purposes. So thank you very much, Olivia, Tuija, and I thank you for being part of this little effort at dissipating glamour. And hopefully there are many other efforts going on esoterically around the world. Lots of love from everybody and many blessings, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.